I have made it absolutely no secret in the past on this channel that I love The Legend of Zelda to no end. I could see anybody finding a specific entry in the series to be their absolute favorite one, and I would completely understand, and I believe a lot of the larger fanbase would too. Quite frankly, I don't believe any other franchise comes close to expressing such a wide variety of gimmicks and enthralling creative ideas while simultaneously maintaining an incredible quality standard across the board. The amount of different ways that Zelda can manage to capture the essence of adventure is so refreshing. It can be through telling a gripping narrative with a delightfully rich cast of characters with a greater focus on linearity, or it can be by blowing the doors open from frame one and letting you get lost alone in a living, breathing world that you'll never know all the secrets of. Somehow this series can iterate, reinvent, and revolutionize, and yet no matter what, you're going to go on an incredible adventure that you're never going to forget. And then there's Link's Crossbow Training. Zelda experiments a hell of a lot in the mainline entries, but relative to how huge this franchise's popularity is, there are a pretty scant number of spin-offs. Mario is Nintendo's Mickey Mouse, and by this point I think more Mario spin-offs have come out on the Switch over proper platforming Mario games by a factor of like 5. Mario has tennis, golf, football for every country in the world that's not America, parties, turn-based RPGs, and kart racing, all the while cranking out some of the best 2D and 3D platformers on the market. Zelda, on the other hand, only has a couple major spin-offs to name. I believe this is primarily intended so as to maintain a consistent tone and integrity for the series. I think most people would agree that the Mario spin-offs are inherently focused more on being fun and goofy party games. They're a different flavor of Mario. The platformers are not some grim and dark storytelling masterpiece by comparison, but like, there's attention to what's going on in Super Mario Galaxy. Mario Party, on the other hand, practically tells you from the outset to just lighten up when the plot for all of the games involves every character saying, I think I'm the superstar, actually. No, I am. Oh, I'm sorry, how many Wario parties are there again? Oh, that's right, 0. Oh man, that sucks. All right, pal, you really wanted to go there? I'll give you a piece of my mind. At least all of my 2D games right now. Zelda takes itself a bit more seriously. Again, not to the point of being overly dark by any means, but these games revel in that legendary feeling. It kind of undoes that feeling if we had a damn Zelda Party 6 where the Triforce pieces are being designated randomly now and you saw Ganondorf casually hanging out with everyone else like he hasn't attempted to kill everyone in the room at some point. You get what I mean? Four Swords and Triforce Heroes are both less serious compared to the mainline games, but there's enough traditional Zelda goodness in there to keep the tone in check. That and these games can get away with this by being multiplayer Zelda games, which is just inherently cool no matter who you are, so who cares? Same thing with Hyrule Warriors. Again, very different style of game, but you've got enough of a story and numerous intriguing character interactions that can make it feel like Zelda. Again, this game can also get away with this by having these crossover elements that you would never ever see in the mainline games. Then there's Link's Crossbow Training, a game that was pretty blatantly made for the sake of promoting the Wii Zapper. Yeah, try getting through airport security with this hot piece of work. You'll be on a no-fly list in no time. This is, to me, the goofiest thing that has ever been put in an official Zelda game. This series is full of absurd and quirky NPCs, but this game straight up exists to sell you a piece of plastic. It's just a pointer-based minigame built using assets from Twilight Princess, right? All memes aside, yes, it's basically exactly what it sounds like. Hope I'm not bursting anyone's bubble. I'm sure someone out there heralds this as the best Zelda game. Now, I can only imagine some of you are asking, but why Link's Crossbow Training and why bother talking about it right now? Tears of the Kingdom came out this year. Wouldn't it be way more interesting to talk about that game? There is so much more to talk about there. And to that, I say, this is mostly because lately, okay, well, at the time I wrote this, some friends on Discord have been hyping this game up both, I think, ironically and unironically at the same time. The way I see it, one of two things happened after that. Option A, I've developed some form of gamer Stockholm syndrome and have completely caved into the joke and lost all sense of self. Or option B, I genuinely do feel like this game is a great change of pace for me after that last monstrosity of a video, which you all should watch, by the way. It would be greatly appreciated. Whichever of the two it is, there probably is a little bit of both. This means that I can take absolutely zero credit for this idea, so please go support all of these lovely people who made this happen. They're all incredibly talented people who all deserve your attention and support. So yeah, challenge accepted. Sort of. I did my best, alright? Even I couldn't find a way to make this last an hour. In any case, strap in everyone, we're going to be talking about Link's Crossbow Training. Not even as a joke. Now, Now, hold the phone. I know some of you are probably laughing your ass off looking at me writing out this word in relation to this game, but I promise, just hear me out, it's not what it looks like. I'm not usually the type to go too deep into the development history surrounding the games that I'm talking about. Every now and then I like throwing some trivia in there, but I tend to find myself getting really bored when I'm writing entire paragraphs about this stuff, and I feel as though if you really wanted that background, Wikipedia is just a much more fruitful source to get that information from. This game's development history, on the other hand, I actually do think is really interesting, and I wanted to talk about it. There originally was going to be a story to this game involving time travel and Link wielding a gun. What is it with the mid-2000s and guns, dude? Link's Crossbow Training was originally conceived as an extra story based off of Twilight Princess, which shall now and forever be dubbed the best Zelda game. It's okay, you don't have to keep lying to yourselves anymore, you know this is the best one. Apparently, after the staff had come up with a number of unique premises, or epic tales as Miyamoto refers to them, Miyamoto shot down the idea of the game having any real story at all. The way he talks about it, it sounds like my man really did just walk in, said no fun allowed, and everybody understandably wasn't so on board with the project anymore. This would be one thing if this information was coming from another person on the development team, but this is coming straight from the man himself in his own words. He straight up is just like, yeah, I kinda killed off a lot of the ideas the staff had come up with up to this point. One of the said ideas included the game having any sort of boss fights, which it seems like he reluctantly agreed to allow the developers to implement. I don't feel as though it would have hurt the game to have more varied objectives like that, but whatever, I'll move on. Eventually, everyone felt as though they should just drop the game altogether, seeing as it was primarily built off of already existing Twilight Princess assets. As a last resort, Miyamoto proposed making a prototype for die-hard Zelda fans to playtest to gauge whether or not there was an audience for this game. It turns out that there very much was an audience for this game, and thus the game would go on to develop into the Link's Crossbow Training that we now know today. The game would go on to be the 18th best-selling Wii game by the end of the Wii's life cycle, not too far behind Twilight Princess itself. Critically, it was received fairly favorably, considering what the game is. Most of the critics of the time shared the consensus that the game was too short and averaged about a 6.5 to a 7.0 out of 10 across said critics' reviews. I'm honestly kind of sad that we didn't get to see whatever epic tales the developers had planned out for this game. I would have loved to experience whatever this game would have become if it had a proper story or grander ideas, but I can see why it ultimately got scrapped. As much as Miyamoto sounds like he kind of shot everyone down here, I do think his argument regarding the game's levels being completable in around 3 minutes was a critically good call to make for the game as it exists in its final form. Making a lot of in-depth levels and scenarios sounds great for something in a traditional Zelda game, but in a score attack game like this, I think it was much more preferable to make the focus be put onto being replayable instead of trying to make an epic adventure out of a game that seems like it was built around the idea it would be inherently lighter in scale and scope. That idea seems evident in the fact that the game really wants you to know that you can actually skip these 10-second cutscenes for the whopping 2 boss fights in this game. You can tell that they were really proud of these scenes. So while the game may not have a proper story, I do think it's amusing how the development behind the game ended up making for a pretty funny story in and of itself. Link's Crossbow Training is, as you may have guessed or been able to see this whole time, a third-person shooter consisting of 3 separate styles of gameplay: on-rails target tests, defender levels, and free-roaming ranger levels. The game is naturally very focused on your aiming, and not so much on your ability to think outside the box or explore as you would in other Zelda games. The game has 9 levels with different variations on each gameplay style. The consistent connecting thread between all of them is that the game wants you to greatly prioritize accuracy and combos over eliminating as many targets as possible. I went into the game trying to shoot all the pumpkins and the skulls and such, thinking it would all be adding up, but truth be told, the game really just wants you to keep up a high streak to send your score into the stratosphere. Now, here's where my credibility flies out the window, if it hasn't already left by this point. I have very little experience playing traditional shooters, be it first or third person. I love Resident Evil 4, that's one of my favorite games. I've also played Uncharted 1 and 2, and those games are neat. Outside of that, I have barely touched Splatoon, Halo, and Overwatch. I have extremely little experience outside of miscellaneous side modes or gimmicks that involve aiming like Mario Galaxy's Star Bits. I have equally, if not greater, unfamiliarity with score attack games or rail shooters like Star Fox, Panzer Dragoon, or, Peggle? The only real reason is that I tend to find games like these to be a bit mentally taxing, as ridiculous as that sounds. As someone who played Mario, Sonic, Kirby, and Zelda like it was my job when I was younger, Aiming was never really a skill set that I needed to learn how to utilize quickly. Accuracy and awareness in these games mostly consists of looking straight ahead and attacking or jumping on the guy that you want to get rid of. Turning the camera rapidly and being ready to act immediately at any point was never a feeling I had to get used to because you're in full control at practically all times. Therefore, you rarely ever get put into a situation like that without having a means of preventing it beforehand. So when, all of a sudden, I'm thrust into a segment or a game where I have to have full 360-degree awareness of my surroundings, and have to be ready to react to an enemy or a projectile, and have to be accurate while doing so, it's flat out overwhelming to me. I'm sure with time I will grow more comfortable with it, but I just felt it was important that you know my background, or lack thereof, with this style of game. Now here's where my credibility flies out the window a second time, if you believe, even for a second, that it came back after what I just said. I have a confession to make. I didn't use a Wii Zapper to play this game. I know, it's one of my darkest secrets, but I didn't find it very necessary to buy another completely unnecessary accessory to stick a Wii remote into just for a single game. From what I can gather, the consensus on whether or not the Zapper was actually more comfortable or cumbersome to use seems to be split. Some people argue it got in the way, others are saying it made the Wii remote and nunchuck easier to hold. Now, this is a political debate that I can get behind. In any case, I hope you can all forgive the fact that I didn't truly experience the game as our Lord Miyamoto intended. The appeal of score attack games and rail shooters, as I see it, is to achieve mechanical mastery and awareness of each level with a high emphasis on replayability. The game wants you to play each level multiple times and learn them inside and out. It's about the purest form of getting good you could find in a video game. It is all entirely dependent on your raw dexterity and your willingness to get down in the trenches with some of these levels. You can be more than content to move on with your life after playing these levels once, but the real fun and fulfillment comes from going back, getting better, and eventually reigning victorious over whichever levels or segments have been tormenting you. I'm looking at you, you goddamn skulls. I think this manifests the best in the free roaming levels, where you need to find the optimal route and order in which you should take out each of the enemies, and then you go after the miscellaneous extra points after you're done. Not to say it isn't fun to revisit the other style of levels, but most of what you need to work on essentially always comes down to do what you just did, but faster. Dumbass. Wow, rude? Those are my feelings? In the free roaming levels, you do have to be faster, but there are also always little micro adjustments to make in how you move through a level and determine which enemies you take out in what order. It's not a lot, most of the levels are fairly linear anyways, but considering the style of game that they had to work with here, this is a sufficient amount of variety. The game incentivizes this idea of mastering each level by implementing a ranking system, which was an essential addition unironically. It's really dumb, but having categories of medals to give you makes this incentive all the better for me. Something about just making the score larger has never ever been a satisfying feeling in games to me, but if you give me a score bracket to reach or a silly little emblem to tack onto the side of my score, well, all of a sudden it clicks into place for me much easier. Without some sort of visual or achievement to come back for, there's little motivation for you to revisit a level when, as far as you know or care, it'll just be the exact same thing it was last time. The only real reason you'd want to go back, I imagine, is just to get your time and money's worth out of the game so you aren't done in 30 minutes. What I appreciate the most about this game's approach to the ranking system is that the score brackets are the exact same for every level. 20,000 for bronze, 40,000 for silver, 60,000 for gold, and 80,000 for platinum. Forgive the random comparison, but one of the biggest annoyances for me in the 3D Sonic... the Sonic games with a ranking system in them, is that the score target can be so drastically different depending on what level you're trying to max rank. Tens of thousands of points worth of difference. It makes it extremely difficult to gauge how well you're doing until the very end of the level, which can lead to any improvements you make after the fact feeling almost random. Oh, what's that? You killed one extra enemy and ran to the end slightly faster? Now you get an A. Alright. I don't feel like I did anything that differently though. Trust me, bro, that was such a superior run compared to that last one. Alright, I mean, if you say so, you're the one crunching the numbers after all. In this game, you know exactly how well you're doing and how many more points you need to reach your desired rank, and it's a huge time saver when you can just reset and be confident that you aren't throwing away the run in doing so. And it's just nice to have a consistent average score between each level where you can get a much better measure of how much you're improving as you move on with the game. The game is also short enough that going back to replay any of the levels rarely ever feels like a commitment. Because I can't find any better time to bring this up, this game has 3 separate modes: score attack, multiplayer, and practice. They sound different enough, but in essence all consist of the exact same thing. One person shooting stuff with Link's not gun. Multiplayer sounds like it would be different enough. To me, it sounded like it would be 2 people simultaneously competing for the same set of targets, but instead you have to take turns using the zapper and seeing who can get the higher score. This is a fine approach, but I do think it would make the game more fun to have a second option and being able to go head-to-head simultaneously a la We Play Shooting Range minigame. There's a new type of gameplay there that I think the game could have used because, shocker, the practice mode is just you shooting targets, but you can choose any section of a level to revisit instead of needing to replay all 3 sections. To be clear, this is also a good addition for the sake of letting you get good at whatever segment you're looking to get better at. It's just a shame that the game doesn't offer you much of any substantially different modes outside of the standard score attack. Now, not to get too political, but I imagine there's only one question surging through your mind aside from what in God's name is wrong with this man, and that is, which level is the best one? Well, my dear viewer, I will happily give you the answer. That's right, the answer. Link's Crossbow Training tier list, go! Level 7 gets the privilege of going into the bottom tier. Now, I do give this level credit for taking you to the Arbiter's grounds and letting you shoot redeads. That's pretty cool. Everything else about this level is just blech. There are the aforementioned skulls that drove me up the wall, and it's particularly irritating to me because I could not get good enough at the later sections of the level. I had to go all in on maxing this section of the level out. I know, I smell a skill issue. And you would be right. If I'm being real, this level was destined to be in the bottom tier because, oh my god, dude, the number of runs that died to me grazing these skulls just so I could get that one orange rupee, it was just way too high. It'd be one thing if it was just that one section that was annoying, but worse yet is that shooting Aerophos was just plain irritating. I eventually just said screw it to trying to maintain a streak and just fired bomb arrows repeatedly. I'm positive I'm missing some secret strategy here, but I also found this environment to be incredibly bland too. The Temple of Time Ranger section is pretty cool. It's very dense with targets and hidden goodies, and the Lizalfos are fun to take down, but the whole rest of this level just sinks it to the bottom tier for me. The first level lined up in the low tier is level 4. Zora's Domain is a great spot for a target practice minigame, but, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous for me to unironically criticize, but the background music just does not match the energy level of what you are doing whatsoever. Shooting bats in the second section outside of Hyrule Castle is just kind of and I think it'd be more interesting to have fought King Bulblin here as you do in Twilight Princess. The game is already really sparse on boss fights, and I don't see the harm in throwing another one in here as opposed to shooting hordes of bats. Whoa.
Cool.
This level is saved from being stuck in the bottom tier primarily because of the ranger section in the Skulltula Forest. This area is dense with Skulltulas, Dekubabas, pots, boxes, and barrels all over a pretty open area. It feels like you could approach this level from any direction and it would be a viable way to tackle it, which is a really cool sensation that most of the other ranger levels just don't achieve in the same way. Jumping just above level 4 is level 3. It's just fine, and that's about it. I don't have too much more to say about it, honestly. Kakariko Village makes for a very good fit for its target section. The alleyways and overhanging parts of the buildings are great places to stuff some hidden goodies. The fruit balloons and the damn meteorites outside of Hyrule Castletown are a little strange, but it's a fine minigame, if not for the fact that you can feel your neck crying out in pain trying to keep track of the branching pieces of fruit. Lastly, the Great Bridge Defender level is just kind of bland. Not bad, but I think the game uses this level in a much more interesting way later on. Moving on to the mid-tier, we have level 1. Ordon Village, like in Twilight Princess, makes for a chillax locale to start the game on to ease you into what this game is. The Defender level is pretty cool. I tend to get overwhelmed with enemies at some point, and it makes getting a high streak a lot of fun and keeps the level from being way too easy to revisit. The Arbiter's Grounds Ranger level likewise makes for a fantastic introduction to this style of gameplay. It does a great job communicating how important it is to look around every corner and leave no stone unturned. It's also just greatly satisfying to snipe these Bulblins from their watchtowers after having been shot by them who knows how many different times in Twilight Princess. Level 2 is where stuff in the ranking starts getting really good. It does admittedly start off a little weak. Shooting Gorons just feels wrong. Like, I get it, they're a strong species of creature and they probably don't even feel it, but it just doesn't feel right aiming directly at this largely friendly population and shooting them. That and this section of the level has a tendency to pan the camera away or cut the section off right as they spawn in new targets, and I found that to be really irritating. Thankfully, sections 2 and 3 are a big step up. Cruising down Zora's River is not only a great recreation of this minigame in Twilight Princess, but it's also just a plainly great setup for a shooting gallery minigame. You can dot the walls, rock structures, and dams with pots and scarecrows, but you're always able to see the toad polies at the same time, no matter how far you're turning the camera. This is probably my favorite Defender level in the game. That and this music is the perfect mixture of being relaxing but also energized enough to not make you feel like you're supposed to be taking a nap. Finally, this skull shooting minigame makes for a great change of pace and offers a different kind of test that no other level in the game does in the same way. I have trouble describing why, I just think this minigame is a great test of the skill set you develop in this game. Speed, accuracy, maintaining a streak, and getting the background goodies are all tested well considering that you're dealing with a single camera angle's worth of level to deal with. For being so minimal, this section is pretty damn cool. Now this is where we begin entering peak Link's Crossbow Training territory, everyone. Entering the top tier, the first on the list is level 9. This level has one of the better amounts of variety in terms of both your location and your objective. In just one level, you go from Ordon Village to the Lost Woods and then to the Gerudo Desert, and that's already cool, but you also get to fight Star-Lord to end the game, and it's a pretty solid final boss. Shooting his hands can require some high precision shots, and his little bubble minions are pretty tough to take down as well. The difficulty across the board on this level is incredibly consistent. I feel like most of the other levels have one section that is just so significantly easier than the other ones, but this one keeps it even the whole way through. The goat riding bokoblins are really chaotic, and I just love that of all the menacing things that these guys could be doing to this village, they decided that it was their job to harass the local farm animals instead of doing literally anything else. This is my favorite target practice level. It feels like there's more than enough room to get ahead for later sections in terms of points, but there's so much going on that you could still find new micro adjustments to make if you really wanted to keep coming back and maxing out your score. Lastly, the Lost Woods Defender segment is just neat. Taking out these freaky ass puppets is very satisfying given how annoying they are in Twilight Princess and how evasive they are in this game. For a final level, this is a pretty good send-off. It challenges you in just about every way the game could without going too far off the deep end. Taking a respectable third place, I'm putting level 6. Ordon's second target practice stage is much more demanding than the first, and it's much more fun to learn as a result. This was the level where I learned just how important it is to maintain a high streak, because getting the platinum after getting my ideal run only required that I got 10,000 points over the next 2 sections. The Great Hylian Bridge is another excellent recreation of a Twilight Princess set piece, and is far more interesting than the stilted single camera setup from level 3. You have a bevy of smaller objects to shoot while you're also being overwhelmed by both airborne and grounded enemies, but it doesn't feel like too much for whatever reason. This level ends on Snow Peak Ruins, which is already an absolute win. You can't spell Snow Peak without peak, first of all, but more importantly, the Chilfos are my favorite enemy type in the game. In order to take one of these guys out normally, you have to be maneuvering effectively at all times and aiming precisely in order to nail one of them. It always feels rewarding to do, and when I finally got the run on this level, it was so satisfying. And the silver medal goes to, drumroll please, level 8. You start off in Hyrule Field riding Epona, which in terms of setup is my favorite layout for the target shooting sections in this game. I find it annoying when minigames like this take the targets down after a certain amount of time because sometimes it leads to moments where you just straight up could not have reacted to your layout in time on your first run. When you're just scrolling the screen like this, it's much harder to get blindsided and feel like the game hit you with a gotcha moment. This just feels like it's all on you. The cards are all laid out on the table and you just gotta be fast enough to take advantage of that. The Defender level in Snow Peak is very cool. Once again, it's kind of overwhelming to a certain point, but not in a frustrating way. Moreover, it seems like the Wolfos are only programmed to lunge if you're looking at them, I think. Either that or they were extremely courteous to me, which, hey, I'll take what I can get. It all seems reasonable and rewarding to get better at doing more efficiently. Finally, we end with my preferred boss between the whopping 2 boss fights in this game, the Dark Nut. Now, don't get mad at me, I love Star-Lord, but in terms of being menacing, there's just something that he just doesn't have on the Dark Nuts in Twilight Princess. I feel that no matter how many times I face one of these guys, their intimidating designs and booming voices always get me on edge, even if they're not really that hard to beat in all honesty. In this game, he's evasive and he sends plenty of noteworthy threats your way through his attacks as well as his swarms of bugs. Overall, this is just a plainly fun level. My favorite level though is level 5. Now, I want to keep it real with you all, the first 2 sections of this level are just alright, but it's the third act that really kicks this one up for me. The City in the Sky is an amazing dungeon and setting just on the face of it. I know I knocked the previous section that used this area's assets, but it's more for the fact that this could be located anywhere in the sky, but this is a proper utilization of the actual dungeon's layout and it feels like it has a personality to it. As unsettling as Ukus still are to me, they make this section pretty challenging to get a clean streak on. They tend to bob up and down in a way that's difficult to predict, and trying to avoid hitting one of them by accident can be harder than you'd think. The Moldorm Defender level is pretty great. The Moldorms themselves are only vulnerable for so long that they create a meaningful and unique challenge from most enemy types in this game. Now, I dissed level 7 earlier saying that the Aerophos are frustrating to take out in the intended way, but the key difference here is that this level is balanced out by having circles of levers where you can just aim at the same spot and focus on timing your hits. It creates a solid ebb and flow throughout the level and ensures that you don't feel like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. What kicks level 5 up to the number 1 spot though, is the Hidden Village. First of all, I don't need to be the one to tell you that the music track alone is enough to bring this up to the #1 spot, but that's not even the beginning of why this section rules. It recreates one of the coolest segments of Twilight Princess, for one, but it's almost like they made this section of that game just to recreate it as a level in this one. It's a small level, but it's so packed full of things to see and obstacles to watch out for. The Boblins are all hidden in pretty sneaky spots and can easily take you off guard if you're not paying too much attention. You have to comb through the alleyways and the inside of buildings just to take cover as well as get a good shot lined up. It's like a proper old western shootout. It makes you feel like such a badass combing through this abandoned town and being the last man standing. Again, when considering the fact that we're talking about Link's crossbow training here, I would argue this level is the culmination of the game's best attributes. For as silly as a game like this is in such a legendary series, it is pretty funny to go back and see Nintendo experimenting with Zelda in a way that they normally don't in the mainline entries. They very well could have scrapped this whole thing. It sounded like some members of the staff already wanted to, but they just figured that Zelda had to be the one to sell the Wii Zapper. May it, rest in peace. For what it's worth, this game is definitely unlike anything else in its series or really any other shooter I've seen or played before. It's very funny to me that this game exists in the form it does, and more than anything, I just genuinely want to know what that alternate timeline looks like where this game had a proper story to it. Even if it didn't end up happening, I just think it goes to show that even when the stakes couldn't possibly be lower, and even if nobody else cares, Nintendo will never half-ass Zelda. Not if they have any say in it. I appreciate you all for watching this video to the end, and I hope it wasn't too out there compared to my usual stuff. I wanted to make a video about something a bit more challenging to write about, and I want to continue trying to make stuff like that in the future. So feel free to leave your thoughts, your rankings, and your 10-page thematic analyses on Link's crossbow training in the comment section down below. I would really appreciate it. That, or please, leave an obituary for our fallen soldier, the Wii Zapper. We hardly knew ye. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.